So today, thought we'd focus on something a bit more sentimental and personal, which is like loneliness and entrepreneurship. I feel like that's something you and I have both experienced, but I think from your perspective, be really interesting. We both know that, it's not a linear path when you're starting a business, whether that's, financially or emotionally or boundaries are pushed and all that stuff. So I was wondering, from your perspective, what were moments you realized you had to reevaluate your workflow and at what cost of the production for your company? Or what do you think are red flags that creatives should see when they're investing their time to an extent? Like, I think everyone's willing to sacrifice to a certain point, but what's something that you realized maybe wasn't worth the sacrifice, or what was a point where you had to incorporate a certain practice in order to keep some sustainable, a sustainable path for yourself in terms of mental health?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. Like, just to level set, I think I have pretty bad depression and anxiety occasionally, but depression's kind of the headline. So I take mental health very, very seriously, and I'm very, careful when it comes to like work or really anything sort of encroaching on just my well-being, because I know how bad it can get so quickly. Um, One thought is, like, I tell any employee that I care about or I'm getting close to, or fellow founders, um, I always ask the question, what are times that you work when no one else is working? And then I ask, what are times where you don't work, where everyone is working? And I like that as a founder, which is to say, um, at like 2 p.m., I'll go on like an hour and a half walk with my dog, or I'll like take a bath, or I'll like whatever. Like pre-COVID, I would like occasionally like just go and get a massage. It's kind of a fuck you to, it's like, I'm an entrepreneur. I work for myself. This is a perk. I can do what I want. But I work at 5 a.m. For me, it's actually when my depression's the less the not the best, I guess. Um, I like working weekends. I like doing like strategy sessions with my chief of staff for 2 hours or 3 hours on like a Saturday morning. And that's when most people aren't working, and I don't mind grinding. I never work at night. Some people work until 1, 2 in the morning that are entrepreneurs that I know. I never work past 5 or 6 ever, ever. Maybe I respond to an email or two, but like no proper work. So I think just finding those times where like at 5:42 in the morning when it's still dark outside right now and I'm grinding and I'm on my third cup of coffee, I feel good. I'm like, I'm putting out work, I'm making a difference, the world's asleep, rah rah, hustle porn, and that makes me feel good actually. And then the 2 p.m. bath, walk, massage, whatever, self-care is my time to be like, I don't have to answer to anyone but me. And that helps too. So I think that's like a nice way, at least I think about it. How about you?
Um, I think it's interesting because I feel like your boundaries with time are really good, and that in itself is like a skill because I think so many people easily carry over 5 or 6 p.m. Work extra hours, not even like realizing, or maybe even just looking at the clock and being like, I just have to do one more thing, and then like by the time you know it's 7:38. I think definitely we might be reverse. Like I have, like as of lately, I've been waking up early, fitting in my like self care time, which funny enough with like my modeling kind of ties into that, so I see it as like my time investment into like my body. So I wake up, go to the gym, eat really well. I make a point to cook like one meal a day, like some, and when whatever that is, if that's like a 2 hour meal or a 30-minute like taste test of something, I try to make sure to incorporate food in that way. And then I tend to go over in time. Like I tend to kind of, depending on how my night goes, I tend to do overtime after, but I find that I'm a night owl, so it works well for me. And I kind of like being up in my nook in my studio, candles lit, like on Pinterest, creating a board for something. And even that kind of feels like recreational. So I think it's about also finding the elements that are that like kind of mindless stuff, the thing that brought you into that work, right? Like the things that feed you and you don't really feel like it's a drain, And I think strategically putting the things that you have to get done at a certain point of your day, whether that be really early in the morning or, during the afternoon where it is aligned with other people working. And I really like that idea though. I like the idea of you're beating the clock in a way. So mentally you're in a space where no one else is, and it kind of gives you this like isolation in your work. And I'm sure that
Oh,
really helps start a day that's busy.
yeah. I really like your sentiment of like getting back to the things of why you started. Like my weekend work tends to be stuff I really fuck with and enjoy. Um, it's the only way I can palate doing it, working on the weekend when I'm not supposed to be working. My
Right.
morning time tends to be grind time where like I get shit done. Um, because I feel like a badass. I look outside and it's dark and I'm like, I'm doing it. Like, let's go. And I get something out of that. I had something to say, which is trying to remember. Um, oh, I think it's important to feel like you're giving to, not being pulled from.
Mm,
So like when you feel like I have to, or like something's being yanked out of me, it's a very different vibe than like your candles are going, a night owl, and you're like, I'm choosing to give. I'm choosing to like output into this thing that I believe in, whether it's an action that is like a little bit like bitch work needs to be done, or whether it's something you super duper feel connected to. At least you're like choosing to give it. There's some autonomy. But when
exactly.
you feel like it's like, the way we did it as kids when we had homework and it's like this, you have to do this. And like homework, even if it was something that like interested you or your favorite subject, it just felt like a job. It felt like a task. It felt like a job. It felt like it was being yanked from you, and your parents were making you and your teachers were making you. So I think so long as you feel like I'm choosing to do this, that can be very empowering.
Totally, totally. And like having autonomy over your time and balance, it's almost like checks and balances. Like I feel like there, as you know, like what we were talking about, like the hustle porn stuff, like there is a level of that that's like power through anything, like the pain, like get through the pain. And like they kind of sell you on this pain. When in truth, like, yeah, you're gonna do a lot of stuff you don't necessarily want to do, like especially when you're starting a company, like there are things that maybe aren't your specialty and you wish you had a team for, and you can compartmentalize those things and give it to other people. But all in all, it's like the reason why you're in a certain business should be because it feeds you, either feeds your soul or feeds you literally with pay. And like those things should motivate a certain extent of it. And maybe it's not 50-50, but it definitely should be enough where it keeps you going through the parts that you're not so happy about. And I think that's where sometimes like society fails. And that's why people like, that's why the masses are depressed. I mean, there's no surprise that you and I struggle with those things as people that are in a way, like we created our own jobs. And then there's people that are in jobs where they just felt like they were cornered in and this is their life now and this is forever. And it just becomes this like dangerous cycle for everyone, like the entire working class, really.
Yeah, here's a very unpopular opinion, so feel free to yell at me if you think this is like entitled, inappropriate, whatever. There's something interesting. I call it, I've come up with a name for it, which I call the drumbeat of obligation. So like most people, like most of my friends, let's say, they have to work because maybe the originally it was because like society expects you to or whatever. But oh, by the way, they have rent or they have a mortgage. At my age 30, like people are like married or maybe they have a kid or something. Like they have to save up for the mortgage. They've got to save up for their kid to go to college. Their kid's going to go to college, then they have to save up for retirement. It's basically these cycles of debt where you're like going into debt for your mortgage and slowly paying that off, then going into debt for student loans and slowly paying that off, and then saving up for retirement, and then being able to retire. And those people, love to come to dinner with me and bitch about their boss and how they got passed over for senior director of da da da, and like how they worked 80 hours last week and it wasn't fair and whatever. And I pity them, but on the other hand, I'm like, it keeps them going. It gives them something to chase. It gives them something to shake their fist at. They're like, I'm not totally happy, and it's because my boss's boss sucks, or I didn't get this promotion, or I want to be making $90,000 a year and I'm only making 77, and like it kind of, and I've got to save up for my mortgage, and don't they understand? And right, it kind of gives you a foil, it gives you an enemy, it gives you something to punch at. And then when you're someone like you or someone like me, where you don't have the man, right? You've like created your own little universe, your own little sandbox, and you don't really have, like, of course, yes, you have to pay your bills and so on, but you don't have the boss that's like being a dick to you. You don't have a promotion to get. You don't have, like, a lot of it's taken away. And so a lot of the thing, like when you're feeling like I'm not fulfilled, I'm not happy, I'm run down, I'm exhausted. It's not like I'm exhausted because this person, my boss, is causing me harm, or I'm exhausted because they just don't appreciate me at work and I just don't feel fulfilled. It's like then you actually have to start asking really existential questions like, is this really my purpose? Am I really connected to this? Am I, what difference do I want to make while I'm here on this planet? Like these are big questions instead of just the what do I have to do to get that promotion or make 12,000 more a year or make my boss happy so he just gets off my fucking ass. And so I pity my friends when I go out to dinner with them. But on the other hand, I sometimes think it's harder to ask the existential questions and to actually seek out actual fulfillment.
Mm.
And you actually have figured out what it's like to do your dream and how it's sometimes awesome and sometimes not. And that's a much ruder awakening, I think, than the time honored realization that a 9 to 5 job kind of fucking sucks.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, this is something I talked to my mom about because she's a professional calligrapher. Before the pandemic, she was doing huge jobs for like Oprah and Tiffany and whatever. Like her, like people budgets got cut, and like very literally, she got cut out of the picture for so many clients. And I mean, I talked to her as a freelancer. I'm like, Mom, like we decide if we give ourselves a promotion. And this kind of ties back into the whole like making boundaries with time. Only you and I could decide if we're going to step a business to a certain level, or only she can decide that she's going to create a product so she has another stream of income from her work, or all these things. And it it is definitely like a harder process to get to where we are in a way. Well, actually, I don't want to say that because I understand like going through the school system and going to college, like that's not something I went through. And my experience was elevated by my like modeling very, very young. And like that's a privilege in itself. I understand that. So I think though, having an existential conversation with yourself at a young age might be really hard. I think a lot of people do that before they go to school. And some people go to school still with a question mark and they're like, crap, let's see if this works. So I give credit to everybody that does have that conversation before they make steps like that towards a job. But I think all in all, like, yeah, purpose is big. And I know for me, if I didn't have a bigger, daunting, like, question about life and what I wanted, I wouldn't be doing the work I do. And I wouldn't be, even in social media, it could be a very, what's the word? Self-centered, it could be all these, like, it could be self-centered, it could be like shallow, but like having purpose in this space too is almost the most crucial thing because you're presenting yourself on a silver platter to a ton of strangers.
Yeah, I mean, Phoebe, that's something that I've like deeply respected about you and had the privilege of, like, not to sound like an old man or like I'm like your older brother or something, but like I've watched you because for those that don't know that are watching this, like I met you when you were 16 and you were like signed on 3 continents as like a like super legit model, right? And then you kind of left that all behind. And I've watched you sort of ask really hard questions that a lot of people never ask ever, and you ask them at age like 18 or 19 or 20 or whatever, of like, who am I? Like, what is my brand? What do I really believe in, align to? What do I want to be putting out there? What do I want to be doing? Like, what is your platform exactly? Like, you're starting this podcast and you've done art installations and you've really followed your heart. I think that takes tremendous courage and It's, as you point out, it's very hard work, but on the other side of that, like we were talking about with bottom up marketing, if you understand what your product is, you can find the people in the world that will fuck with that product and market to them and build a very clean engine, very clean sales engine where you're only marketing yourself and your products to those who might find it interesting, not doing the exhausting and inefficient task of trying to please everyone. And you've done the hard work of understanding your product, which is to say yourself, and therefore I think are having a lot of success. I would attribute at least some of your success to the fact that you know who you are more than most, more than most brands and more than most humans, and certainly more than most 21-year-olds that I know. So that's like a huge testament to you that you, and I've watched you, you know, not to embarrass you or blow up your spot, but we've had like conversations through tears, you and I, where, you know, we were struggling through this, one or both of us. So it's not easy, you know, but you've done the work, which is really, I think, to be respected.
Thank you. Yeah, wow, we have gone through the tears and it all, haven't we? But yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it definitely now I think I look back and when there were moments where I kind of was shedding old habits or people or teams or agents or whatever, like those moments are hard because you're losing like a sense of identity. Like even in like even being locked in a job you hate, if you quit, there's a reason why people freak out. It's like because you're losing a sense of this identity that you had for so long, and it's weirdly comfortable, even when you're uncomfortable, even when you're complaining about your salary or whatever. And yeah, working through that and being okay with a little bit of struggle to get somewhere where ultimately you feel fed is really crucial. And I think more than ever, that's when you have to really prioritize creating those boundaries too, because that's the only way that that process is going to be as easy as it can, because there's a lot to unpack, especially when you're going against the grain and everyone you know is whatever. Like all my friends are in their fourth year of college, they're going to be graduating, they're going to come to New York, meet me in New York and have their work, and it's going to be like almost in my head it's like even playing field where yeah I've have a, wow, how many years at this point? Like almost 9 years of work prior to them in a way. But at the same time, it's like that was working for me to get to this point where I'm able to sustain my own life and create my own life in this way. And they've worked the 4 years that in school to
Yeah,
get
it's
to a
kind of
point where they
like
can go into the
my
brand.
analogy I keep forcing down your throat about fruit ripening on a tree, right? Like, you know, you guys have been on very different trees ripening in your own ways, and they've been like in the high school, college, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go and like be a sign model and I'll like be in Tokyo, see you later. And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna go and like, you've done it all. You've like worked for companies, you've started stuff, you've, you know, your platform has evolved in all kinds of ways. So you have all this worldly experience. And I think it would be really interesting to see like when, you know, I have friends that are runners, just to really mince analogies, that like, you know, they'll go, and I was talking to one of them, he's like, he's training at altitude, he's running a lot of hills, and he's about to go run a race, not at altitude on a track. So how does the altitude help? How does the fact that it's hilly help? How is it going to translate to like a time on a track, which is about as like standardized as you get? And it's the same thing where you've been like on hills at altitude doing all this crazy shit. And it's like, cool, when you get on a track next to another racer who like went to high school and college and then is graduating college, and she's like 21 and starting her first job, and she's like a junior account executive at da da da. What's that going to be like when you guys get dinner together, right?
Mm-hmm.
My contention is that you're going to like be worlds ahead of them. You're like 28 to 30 in my mind in terms of your maturity in the professional landscape, you know? And so it's going to be a while before you sit at a dinner with friends and you're like, ah, they're speaking my language. Really, you know, it's going to be interesting. Um, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think a lot of people are going through the exercise that you and I have gone through who am I, what am I all about, etc., because of COVID. And my next appointment is here, so maybe we can leave it on this thought. Like, COVID took a lot away. You know, you just said it took some stuff away from your mom. It took work away from people, but it took distractions away, right? Like, I lived in New York before, and I might go to an exercise class, and I might get 3 cocktails, and I might go on a date with Sally, and I might go on a date with Susie, and I might go out with my friends. These da, da, da. There's all this stuff happening, and if I wake up one Wednesday morning and I'm like, you know what, I'm not very happy. Why aren't I happy? It's kind of hard to do the math because there are all these variables. It's like, maybe I'm not happy because I had 3 cocktails last night. Maybe I'm not happy because I'm dating the wrong person. Maybe I'm not happy because of work. Maybe I'm not happy because I stayed up too late. Maybe da da da. And when COVID is like, well, actually now you don't date, and actually now you don't socialize as much, and you're not like going to a bar, and you're not no exercise classes, and just like, okay, well, who am I exactly when you take away all of these distractions and tentacles and things? And like, do I fuck with that person? Yes or no? And if no, why not? It kind of simplifies the calculus. And
Mhm.
so you and I have had to do that and look in the mirror of like, we're doing our dream. So we should be happy. And if we're not, it's really obvious because we don't have all of the excuses of my boss and this and that. It's just, and I think a lot of people have had that experience of like, my life's a lot simpler right now. And so if I'm not fucking with it, it's it's got to be one of these like 3 things because I've kind of boiled the whole equation down.
Right.
So I've watched a lot of friends go through some pretty important growth, and I think there's so much destruction and ugliness that COVID's brought, like death, sickness, uh, economic hardship, civil unrest, like politics, all of it bad, totally, you know. But there's also, I think, some beauty like coming from the ashes, which is that people are asking the hard questions and getting some answers that I think will serve them very well.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think more than ever, people are trying to control that narrative. So I think if anything, it's just about taking control again and like owning it if you don't like your job, owning it if you don't, whatever. So you don't feel like you're at mercy of life. Because that's the biggest thing. I think that's what we've learned and come to accept the wins with the losses for. So,
There are two things I'll send you after this, and if people are fucking with this talk, they can look into it. One is a talk by Jordan Peterson, who's a pretty divisive character. Some people love him, some people hate him, whatever. But this I find to be very true, irrespective of what you think of the man. He has a talk. You just Google "pick your damn sacrifice" or "choose your damn sacrifice." I've talked about it before, and it's this idea of like life has malevolence, like there is evilness in the world and you will feel unhappy about things, period, end of story. But instead of your sacrifice choosing you, which is to say like you have to work, you have to do this, choosing it, it's still a sacrifice, it's still hard. The whole work a day in your life, you know, love your job and you'll never work a day in your life isn't true. You still work hard, you work really hard, maybe harder, but to choose it and to have that autonomy is a beautiful thing. So I love the way he conceptualizes it as choosing a sacrifice, and we should all be so lucky as to choose as opposed to being chosen. And then the second thing that might be interesting is David Brooks wrote this thing called, I think it's called Two Mountains, or it's something about two mountains. It's basically like the first mountain in life is, am I making enough money? Do I have enough like credibility, clout? Do people like me? A lot of this sort of narcissistic shit that drives people. And the second mountain is like, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Am I connected to others? Am I giving back in the ways I want to? It's like the more wholesome shit. And most people never make it to the top of the first mountain or only just do and then retire. And that's it. But you should be very lucky as to like either sort of bypass the first mountain as you almost did or like move through it quickly. There's a valley between the two, which is the valley of like, wait, I thought making money or getting the title or being a sign model on 3 continents would like bring me joy. It didn't. Now what? and there's this big like drop off of like, ah, like that wasn't it. That wasn't the answer. I got to the top of the mountain and it didn't feel good. Now what? And so begins the process of climbing the second and bigger mountain of like, you know,